The Quarantine Sessions podcast with J. Cole.
How's it going, Mark?
Yeah, I don't know. Pretty good. I don't know what happened there, but I lost you for a minute.
It's expected. These it's a new thing for everybody doing these Instagram live podcasts, but Mark Henson, everybody. We got Mark Henson on the podcast. That's exciting.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah. So
Good
yeah,
evening from California.
from California. What part of California are you in right now, Mark?
North of San Francisco.
Cool. Yeah, I grew up in
Now,
Mill Valley.
oh, okay. I'm up by Santa Rosa, Ukiah, Lakeport area, Lake County.
Nice.
Nobody knows where that is. That's why I moved here.
Yeah, I know where that is. I've been there. But yeah, California, man, so beautiful. I miss California sometimes. Love it so much.
Oh, you're doing okay.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Bali's also good. Also a good place to be
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
It's beautiful place. Beautiful place with a beautiful culture.
Hmm. Yeah, so I've been a fan of your art for a long time. I've always been inspired by the depth of symbolism and how you construct narratives around your art that are really socially impactful, and how you use art to communicate these powerful ideas that I believe can transform the world. And yeah, it's an honor to be speaking with you here. I was wondering if we could start a little bit, if you wanted to just kind of, I'm curious to know more about your path as an artist. Like what defined your journey to becoming an artist, and how did you start making these amazing paintings?
Oh gosh, I've been an artist as long as I can remember. When they labeled me as an artist when I was in kindergarten, I liked to always draw stuff, but it took a while to realize it, within myself that that's what I really wanted to do. But by the time I was in high school, I was pretty much on my road, knowing what I was going to do and what I was all about. And I lucked out and had some good teachers to help me out and show me how to avoid doing the stuff I didn't want to do in school and pay more attention to art and stuff. So yeah, I got pretty serious about seventh or eighth grade. Realized I could do it and wanted to, and sort of kept going from there. Of course, life has its distractions. You got to go do some experiences and get thrown in jail a time or two and stuff, just so you know what things are all about. And
Oh yeah.
how do you survive? You got to figure out how to put bread on your table and keep a roof over your head. So you go through a few struggles along the way that maybe distract you a little bit from your art career, unless you're an instant success. So yeah, I knew what I wanted to do, and I kind of pursued it, and it did take a long time before I was able to make my entire living. But I have basically been doing art related stuff my whole life, one way or another.
Yeah. I think it's important
Yeah.
that you had people that encouraged you, like you had teachers and people in your life that were able to make you feel confident in being an artist. And I'm really grateful for that too. I've always had people encourage me in my artwork, but I know a lot of people who haven't had that, and it seems like that's one of the most important parts of being able to blossom and to succeed as an artist, is having supportive people that can help you to believe in yourself, that you can actually do it.
My parents always encouraged me to be whatever I wanted to be. They just said, just make sure you do a good job of it. And I have a great, well, they're gone now, but I had a great aunt and great uncle who were successful artists down in LA. My uncle designed things like perfume bottles for Maybelline, and my aunt did fashion drawings for the LA Times. And they did all kinds of other artistic stuff for their, side work or on weekends. So their house was filled with art. And so in my family, there was a precedent that art wasn't necessarily some fluffy thing that was never going to work out. If you really wanted to, you could make it work. So I wasn't discouraged from that. It was more like, well, if you're going to be an artist, make sure you make some money at it. It's kind of more of the attitude I got subjected to. And
Yeah.
like I said, I was really lucky in high school. I had some of my teachers were serious artists who showed in New York and San Francisco regularly. So, and they did a lot of their own work in the schoolroom. So basically hanging around at my high school art classes was like being in the studio with a working artist. So it gave me a good idea of what to expect and, how to get in good work habits and stuff like that.
That's great. And did you grow up in California? How long have you been in California for?
I grew up here, Northern California.
Okay, cool.
I grew up. My folks moved. I moved from the Bay Area to Sacramento when I was 5.
Okay,
and grew
cool.
up there.
Okay, and you were kind of then primed to be right in the kind of thick of it during the psychedelic revolution in the 60s and 70s, right? Like, what were your experiences of California back then?
Thank God for small mercies. I lived close enough to San Francisco to be able to get there with my thumb.
Yeah.
Let's see, this way, yeah. So, yeah, we found out about the Haight-Ashbury when I was about 14. And it was like 1966. It was just kind of getting going. And somehow we managed to get down there and have the hippies laugh at us for being some little kids running around trying to be cool. And a couple years later, we were coming down there on a regular basis, to see shows at the Fillmore and the Avalon and all the other places, bands in the park, and do all the stuff that all the hippies were reputed to do. We did it. And it was fun. And there was a lot of artistic activity and cool stuff going on. It was a time of a lot of personal freedom. And I had it. My folks would allow me to run around or take off for the weekend and stuff. As long as I kept my school grades up, I could claim my time as my own and go do what I wanted. And so I was really lucky. I got to experience all of those good things. And of course, the music was the best. I feel sorry for the youth of today having to put up with DJs instead of real musicians. Oh, excuse me, DJ friends. I don't mean to be condescending. But it was a good time for music. There was a lot of creativity blossoming. And that was the best part of the whole time. The whole period was that so many people were trying to explore all kinds of creative ideas, art and music and dance, and pretty much anything else. A lot of experimentation going on. And I was lucky enough to be there. Kind of young.
Yeah,
I came in kind of late.
You came in kind of late to that scene?
Well, yeah. The people like Mouse and Kelly or the guys in the Grateful Dead, they were all like 5 and 10 years older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but it's just, looking back at that time period, I love watching documentaries from that time because it seems it was the golden age of psychedelic exploration and art and creativity. And I can only imagine what it was like to actually be there in that time. When I go to Haight-Ashbury now, it's like almost like it's like a tourist attraction. It's a shadow of what it was then, I think.
Well, it actually, the whole thing didn't really last very long, only a couple of 3 good years. It made history because it was so impactful. It seems like it went on for a couple of generations, which it did, but in its own way. But the actual San Francisco world and all the hippies on Haight-Ashbury and all the good shows and stuff, it was really only for a few years. And then there was
Wow.
kind of a diaspora where everybody moved out and wanted to go back to the land or go explore the world, go see what India or Mexico was like. And so
Hmm.
all the hippies kind of dispersed everywhere and seeded out to the world. And so now what was only a few thousand people back then is now millions of people kind of share similar philosophies and want to try to live
Hmm.
creative and wholesome and happy lives, in a
Mm.
world full of peace and love instead of war and hate. Seemed like a good idea
Hmm.
to me at the time. It still does.
Still a pretty good idea, definitely. Yeah, I'm curious, you having been kind of in psychedelic culture since the 1960s when that was first happening, and you participated a lot in events and stuff now with the more kind of Burning Man psychedelic culture with electronic music and stuff like that. Like how have you seen that change? Like do you see similarities to what is kind of going on now compared to then?
Well, as far as the festivals and raves and all that stuff goes, it was pretty raw back then. You showed up with a flatbed truck and some amplifiers and a generator, and the guys got on the back of the truck. You parked it by a lake or in a park somewhere, and you had a concert. And
Mm.
there wasn't vending, and there wasn't tickets and being searched to go in and all that kind of stuff. A ticket to go to a show at an indoor venue like the Fillmore was only $2 or $3, so it
Wow.
didn't break you, to save up your lunch money and get yourself down to the city on the weekend and go see a show. It was easy to do, and the freshness and rawness of it was nice. It wasn't as visually oriented. Well, they had light shows, but with the advent of electronica and the DJ world, watching the guy play with his knobs and laptops isn't so exciting. So the venues started making elaborate stages and having really crazy decor and stuff, which is really cool, in my opinion, which we didn't have a lot of
Hmm.
that back then. People would decorate the place up a bit, but not like now, where there's whole teams of guys that would hang up stuff and build a whole temple of dance and stuff. That was pretty rare. We were more like take the truck down to the lake and have a party, was more the way we
Hmm.
were doing stuff. But really, it's all an evolution. Still, any excuse to get all the guys and girls and everybody together and have a good time is kind of what it was all about. And that still goes on, of course. And youthful people are always looking for new experiences and adventure and meet their tribe. You want to hook up with people that are like you and see what they're up to and what everybody's doing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it goes on. It's kind of nice to see the evolution now today, because the last couple of weeks with all this stuff having to do with Black Lives Matter and various demonstrations and stuff is very reminiscent of back in those days. It's
Right.
different. There's a broader context. Back then, it was like anti-war or civil rights. All those things are still going on. I think we have a little more unity between the various factions now. For instance, in Black Lives Matter, that most everybody wanted to join in and express their opinion. Whereas back then it was pretty much, most of the civil rights stuff, it's black people only, or when we had what they called riots in 68 after Martin Luther King was assassinated and stuff. A lot of it was centered in the black neighborhoods where stuff got burned down, and where white people, you didn't go down there, you're going to get your ass kicked. But nowadays
Mm.
you can, if you're white and want to be part of the movement, you're welcome. Everybody's welcome, which is how it ought to be.
Mm. Yeah.
So there's some different. There's similarities and differences, but I'm glad to see that there's some catalyzing for social change, because we've been needing I don't like to see riots or anybody get hurt or killed or buildings burned down or any of that kind of stuff. But sometimes, you got to rock the boat to make some change happen. And my experience through all of this time has been that, you got to sometimes break some eggs to make the omelet. It's, I hate to say it, but Americans really don't like to change much unless their arm is twisted. So it's high time.
Yeah, that's something like, I've talked to my dad a lot about what's going on. He's the same generation that you are. And he told me the other day, he's like, you have to understand that like all this stuff was going on back in the 60s, but it's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's better now than it was back then. There's been a lot of progress made with, racial equality and stuff like that. He told me that, he still remembers he was on a road trip with his family. He grew up in New York City, and he was somewhere in the South, and they stopped at like a gas station or something. And it was still in the period of time where there were drinking fountains where it was like only whites and blacks could, they had to use like separate drinking fountains, which is crazy to imagine living in a world like that. And what you're talking about with it being primarily centered within African American communities and it being segregated, where it seems like a lot of the white communities didn't care as much, or they weren't really trying to put much energy towards equality, that it shows that a lot of progress has been made with everybody coming together to support this issue, regardless of what race people are.
Well, yes and no. If you were a black person, you would probably disagree with that statement a little bit and might be of the opinion that not much has changed at all. The police are more violent and murderous, perhaps, than they were then, but maybe we'll never know because there weren't video cameras everywhere. So what were they getting away with that we never found out about? How many young black men were, out in a ditch in the woods somewhere that we never heard about? There's probably quite a few, but so it's hard to like statistically say, are things better or are they worse? We see more black people on TV and in the movies. The presence of the various color groups is more pronounced, but are we actually treating each other like we should? Donald Trump has, ripped open the wounds of racism that have been in our country ever since they brought the first black person here voluntarily. And so you see that underneath our surface of, oh, what a great country we are, what a melting pot we are, that underneath, that's not really the case. There's a lot of hatred and fear and disunity there. And to see it in action after so many years when we've been, battling against it and trying to live new ways and find new ways to appreciate each other, it's still there lurking under the surface. It's kind of disappointing. The Martin Luther King's dead a long time.
Right.
And things should have got better now.
Well, I hope that with everything that's going on, that it's a critical point where things will change because people are not willing to tolerate the injustice anymore. And if enough people stand up and decide that they can't tolerate it and that they won't tolerate it, then I hope things will have to change.
Well, I hope so, because we're kind of on the cusp of we could change ourselves into a culture where we share and appreciate each other, or we could continue down the road towards a more of a every man for themselves / fascistic situation where everybody's only looking out for number one, yet at the same time we can't trust each other and live in fear of each other, that we're going to do each other in for some reason or another. Or we can just share the wealth and enjoy each other's company. Seems like a no-brainer to me, but it seems like there's a lot of people that feel the other way and are willing to, walk around with their guns to prove it. So how we're going to, there's a lot of parallels of now with how Germany was just before the rise of the Nazi Party to power.
Yeah.
And if you know your history at all, there's a lot of scary parallels that could make one have some real fear for the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that too, and it's really scary to consider. Um, I mean, these are themes that you've been painting about for many years, and when I look at your paintings, it seems to parallel really strikingly a lot of what is going on in the world now. You even have that painting with the virus that's like ravishing over the world and stuff like that. There seems to be a kind of prophetic quality to your art a bit.
Well, I'm not really trying. Well, my more pleasant and idealistic pictures would be the ones I'd like to have be the prophetic ones.
Right? Yeah.
The more disaster ones, political disaster pictures are usually, I'm trying to warn people away from going down that road, is why I make them, rather than thinking that that's how the future is going to turn out. But I don't really have that much control over it. We make the art hoping it will have a good influence in the world. Whether it really does or not is debatable. Like we were talking about just before we started up here, how does art really have any influence in the world? Does it really make any change? Can a picture, on somebody's phone or in a gallery wall, or spray painted on a wall of a building, can that affect real cultural change or real change in the psychology of humans and help us to evolve to better beings? I like to think it can, but I'm really not sure. And and who knows? But we have to keep trying anyway. I could go out and protest and stuff, and I would do that. But I couldn't do it every day. I want to be creative. So how do I use my creative energy to make better things happen in the world? By example, or showing, artists are supposed to visualize the world how we would like it to be, or make comments on how the world is, and things we'd like to change. So using visual language, our job is to try to have some impact. And, think of art as propaganda, perhaps, for good.
Mhm.
And so I try to bring my messages out for that reason, to hopefully create a little better world for us all. Whether it really works or not, hard to say. I'm in my studio all by myself. I don't really know what the impact is until somebody sends me a message telling me how maybe touched them in some way with what I do. And
Mm.
enough people do that, so I think it's working to some degree.
Yeah, I think that if there are individuals even that have a positive benefit from what you create, then that's like dropping a little stone in a lake and it has a little ripple, and maybe that ripple goes, you don't know how far that ripple goes. But I think that with so much fear and so much chaos and destruction and negative energy in the world, that it's still important to create something that does transmit a positive energy, because you need to have that balance. If everybody just succumbed to despair and fear and stopped making art and stopped making music and didn't even try to create any positive change in the world, then that's a pretty bleak idea to
Ugh.
consider.
I'd
So I'd
rather
rather
live
at
somewhere
least
else.
try.
Take me to another planet, please.
Yeah. Well, just wait. That could be up next, you know?
Well, we might have to do it via plant medicine or something.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Oh
it's
gosh.
hard to say if art does have how much of an impact art has, but I think it does. I mean, you use the word propaganda. Propaganda posters are an example of a way that works of art can actually have a really dramatic impact on people's worldviews and opinions and beliefs in a collective, you know. And if you're, it's like all art in a way is propaganda to some degree. It's just they're icons and symbols that you're communicating through a visual language, not any different than a propaganda poster. And it's more of what message you're trying to transmit and communicate. If you're transmitting and communicating a positive message, that's a bit of positive propaganda that hopefully touches somebody, that hopefully helps them remember something within themselves deep in there that reflects the unity that we all on some deep primordial level know to be true?
Well, yeah, the art comes in a lot of different forms, of course. Some artists, they want to communicate an emotion, or they're so excited by just the colors themselves that's what the art's about, is maybe just the swirls of color, and it doesn't have a quote unquote meaningful message, or is trying to influence you in any other way other than to try to make you feel warm or cold, or some other emotion. And
Mm-hmm.
or some other art is made to be very explicitly to carry a message. A lot of religious art was meant to convey the stories of the Bible to people that didn't know how to read. So how would you communicate the story? Through a visual message or an allegorical painting. So I kind of fall along that category a little more with a lot of my pieces, where I am having a very specific kind of political message I'm trying to get across, or at least make you think about something, where a specific theme I want you to consider. So I tend to be on the narrative side of that equation, rather than, I do like the pretty colors and swirly patterns and stuff, and just, colored goo for the sake of colored goo is a lot of fun. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I have the power to put it into a form that people can read as a message. And so since I'm able to do that, and I have stuff I want to convey, that's where I tend to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that even in the sort of scarier paintings that you make, that there is this kind of like, there's a glimmer of hope within it also, and I like that you put that in there, and that it's not all bad. There's something triumphant about those paintings too, where it shows the kind of heroic struggle between the light and the dark, but usually the light is the one overcoming the darkness in your paintings.
Well, some of my pieces you probably notice they have kind of like two sides. They have a yin and the yang kind of component, or darkness and light, or however you want to look at that, where there's two different sides to a theme. And I like to explore all the sides and let my viewer kind of arrive at their own conclusions as to where they want to go with it. But usually I'll put a little something in there for sure to try lead them down a positive path if possible. Might just be
Mm-hmm.
a happy little frog in the corner, but I usually stick something.
Nice. Yeah, and also I think that art isn't just painting. It's art is also music, art is also film, and I think that throughout history we've seen these art mediums have a dramatic impact on people and their consciousness and how people want to live, for good and bad. I think it influences people both in positive and negative ways.
Well, it's art of various types is what you might call the second oldest profession. But well, when the oldest artifacts they find, evidence of humanity, a lot of them are carvings on bones, or an instrument made out of a bird bone, a flute or something. Some of the oldest things we find, remnants of humanity, are artistic creations. So surely they held a very important place back in the earliest days of humankind. And I don't think any of that has really changed. We're still humans. So our need for those creative impulses and exploring them is still there. We have better tools, of course, today. But I think the skills and the mindset aren't too different at all. We could easily travel back while being creative to the state of mind that someone would have been in a million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the fun of being creative is you can use it for a time machine like that.
Mm. Yeah, I think that making art is just a primordial aspect of human expression. It's something that humans have always done, and I could never imagine a world, even if there's a society that's strongly bent against it, I could never imagine a world where art isn't a vital and important part of civilization. It's just what people do and always have done.
The well, it's been tried the other way a few times. The Nazis in Germany weren't real big on art, even though they stole plenty. They liked other
Yeah.
people's art, but they weren't so creative in their own right. Or the Spartans of ancient Greece, they had a warrior society. They didn't really leave anything artistic behind for us to remember them by. So there's been a few attempts at living without much art, but I think every little kid wants to pick up a burnt stick and scratch on the wall. That's kind of there. That's, at least for me, that's how it was. Hey, I can make something happen here with this colored crayon thing. I rub it on paper or the wall or something, and lines appear. This the very magic of that has always fascinated me, and I think it fascinates everybody until some adult comes along and tells them they shouldn't be doing that.
Right. No, I think that's
Yeah.
something that all kids do. All kids make art, and all kids express themselves, and I think that is evidence that it's something that is deeply ingrained in what it is to be human, and it's something also that all different types of people, regardless of their race or nationality or where they are in the world or their culture, people make art.
Well, as you undoubtedly have noticed from being on the other side of the world there, living in an artistic culture, being able to do art of any kind is a passport to all the cultures of the world. My various travels, and people always want to know, well, who are you? Where do you come from, and what do you do? And when you say, well, I'm an artist, they say, well, got anything to show me? And you show them something, right away the doors open, and they want to introduce you to their friends, and you need to meet so-and-so, and this guy over here is really cool. You got to check his stuff out. And pretty soon you're off to a world of adventure. Whether you know their language or not, it works really well. And, and any form of artistic expression seems to cross those borders.
Yeah, I mean, there's a magic to it of being able to speak the language of the spirit and communicate to the spirit in a way that transcends cultural boundaries, that transcends language, all these other barriers, these social barriers that we have up around our interactions with people. If you can create a work of art, a painting or a piece of music, that can speak to people regardless of if they are the same as you. And so it helps also lend itself to the unification of the diversity of the planet, I think.
Oh, absolutely. You're when I was over there in past years, like we were talking about, I did a lot of designing and drawing while I was there and met a lot of creative people. And some of my jewelry designs are probably still being made and sold there in the stores of Kuta. They got pirated from me. And a few other things. And so there's a cross-pollination goes on, I think. And while I was there, I had a lot of wood carvings made to my designs. But to make sure they're being done the way I wanted, I'd go to the woodcarver's house all the time. And of course I want to pick up the chisels, and then he'd be saying, no, you got to do it like this, and he'd be showing me what to do. Even though we're working on my designs, he was telling me how to use the tools. So it kind of goes like that all around the world with all of us. And one of the things I think has been really good about modern times is our ability to communicate and share is unparalleled now. As this podcast is a good example of that. Back in the days, when I was just getting started out, the only way to find out about other artists was see a magazine article or go to a museum or an art show. You had to physically be present in some way. And there wasn't any other way to do it, or maybe read an art magazine or something, but to actually get on the phone and talk to somebody you wanted to meet was just finding their phone number was a major obstacle. Nowadays, it's very easy to contact people and get in touch with folks, even very famous ones, so we can all share what we have. And that part's miraculous, and I really love that aspect of all this.
Yeah. I never cease to be amazed by that and to be delighted by the miracle of being able to communicate with amazing people all over the world. And it doesn't matter. You could literally be in the middle of nowhere and have no one that's of like mind near you. And if you wanted to all day be talking to the most amazing people on the planet through the internet, you can do that. And I think that that's incredible.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what we're doing. I'm out in the boonies in Northern
Yeah.
California, and you're out in a little island. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we
It's
got people online here listening in. They're probably from all over the place too, of course.
absolutely. Mark, I wanted to ask you, do you have some kind of, if you could express your vision, like your highest vision for what could happen in the world in the future, not in a kind of like negative dystopian, we're gonna see the rise of the Nazis again, but like, do you have a kind of positive vision for what the planet could turn into in the near future?
Well, yeah, actually, I do. I'd like to see everybody realize that how dependent we are upon Mother Nature for our survival. And that if we could learn to communicate clearly with each other and to respect Mother Nature and live in a sustainable and harmonic way, with so that our race can continue is what I would like to see. I don't have a lot of hopes of starting a colony on Mars and ensuring that we survive by launching into outer space. Maybe someday, but we have so many problems here on the planet Earth that we need to solve. I don't see us getting anywhere until we evolve ourselves here. It could happen in biological evolution or psychological evolution or forced evolution by hooking us up to microchips or whatever. I don't know what's going to happen with all that stuff. Maybe it would happen and it's good. Maybe it doesn't happen and it's good. I'd like to think that we're intelligent enough and love each other enough that we can overcome all our differences and get together and make a good world. There's a lot of people share the same opinion and are working to do good stuff. But there's a lot of people that are working the other way. So it's all in flux. And maybe it's always going to be in flux. It might be a relative thing, but meanwhile, animals are disappearing and the forest is disappearing and the oceans are rising and things are changing in many negative ways. And I don't know if we have time to reverse that. I like to think we do. I try to live in a way that is not consuming a whole lot of things. I have a solar powered house and everything. So that's one of my little contributions towards not being too destructive. Hopefully with what I'd like to see is for there to be universal education for everybody, because I think the more educated everybody is, the better it works for all of us. Even if you have a job working as a ditch digger or sweeping out the gutter, I think you still should have a college education. All work is honorable. It doesn't matter how it gets done, as long as it does get done. But I think all of us could share the treasures of the intellect with each other and have better lives. And if we were able to do that, I think we'd be treating nature better and understand how all our life and all the things we have are interdependent. And if we're going to stick around, we need to understand how those systems work and live accordingly. So it's, I'm getting kind of old. And I would love to live another 100 years just so I could see how it all turns out. Because right now we're at a time of great change, and where something has to give somewhere soon, and hopefully for the better. But it could go the other way too, and I'm pretty interested to see what happens. But I have pretty good faith that we're smart enough to make things happen. But I guess we'll know, and we'll see who we elect in the fall here. Will give me a pretty good clue.
Yeah.
But aside from the United States, though, I think the rest of the world is going to move on regardless of whatever that we do here. I think other countries of the world are ahead of us in some ways and doing the right thing. So we'll see. Hard to say.
Yeah, universal education, that's a beautiful vision to have, and I agree with that. It's Yeah, it's like the nuances to the global situation and all the different puzzle pieces that fit together to make the world what it is like such a monster. It's such a complex and nuanced thing with so many different parts. It's like it can be overwhelming to think about it. Do you think that psychedelics are a powerful agent to help influence the consciousness? Do you think that if psychedelics were legalized or if they were kind of less stigmatized and more people were using them in a conscious way, that you would see a leaning towards the kind of values that you expressed with peace and unity and cooperation and intelligent thinking and
I'd,
selflessness and all that good stuff?
I'd like to think so. In my own case, having experienced that world it was a life changer for me, and did a lot of good for me in my life, and I think for a lot of other people. And I think overall, yes, if you have a clear vision as revealed through these things, then you tend to want to, for me anyway, I learned a lot about how nature works. And if you can somehow in your mind visualize the universe coalescing right before your eyes, you get a grander view of what's going on. And I think we all need that. It's part of that education I was talking about. I think psychedelic education would be very good. But on the other hand, I met some kids from Israel who spent their time in the Israeli army taking ecstasy and driving their tank over Palestinians' houses. So,
Whoa,
I'd have a tough time doing that while I was high on psychedelics. That they didn't seem to have any problem with it. So, yeah, but the CIA back in the 60s and early 70s did some experimenting with LSD in the American soldiers. They let some out in San Francisco and dosed soldiers without them knowing it. And it was an effort to figure out if they could use LSD as a weapon in war, but it would disable enemy soldiers or make our guys want to fight harder or whatever. They were thinking it could be useful. And of course, you didn't even know which end of your gun was which if you were high enough. So it didn't work out so well either way. Methamphetamine works better for soldiers.
Well, I think that I heard that a
But
lot of the
I
soldiers
like,
that they, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, go
Um,
ahead, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just saying, I heard that a lot of the soldiers that they dosed in those experiments actually decided to quit the army afterwards. I don't know if that's true or not, but like a lot of people had realizations and they didn't want to fight anymore.
Well, certainly amongst the military in the Vietnam War era, most of the soldiers were probably getting high at one thing or another. And psychedelics were very popular amongst the military and the guys that were over in Vietnam. And yeah, it definitely had an effect. Most of them wanted to get out of there as soon as possible and didn't really want to fight
Hmm.
and kill people. And all the psychedelics just reinforced those beliefs. Part of why we're still fighting about this today, they'll still mention, well, we're in a culture war, it's blue versus red or whatever. Well, what it really was, people that wanted peace and love and a little kindness versus people that wanted to be domineering and profiteering. And it's still that
Hmm.
way. It really boils down to, do you want to be greedy or do you want to share?
Yeah, right.
And I've always found I had a better time when everybody was sharing. So that's been my
Yeah,
experience, and I'd like to hope it can continue. And
yeah,
so yeah,
yeah.
overall psychedelics have been a blessing, and I think they're God's gift to humanity, actually. For better or
Mhm.
worse, I think they're a great gift that we can make as a tool and a learning experience. We can take ourselves a long way with them.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting because, people who take psychedelics are self-selected and they're few. And it's becoming more popular, but it's not like it's not a normal part of people's lives yet. You know, and like the culture would have to shift pretty radically for, you know, when you turn 18, you just take mushrooms. That's what you do, and that's what all young people do. That like that the culture would have to shift really dramatically for that to be like a normal thing, you know. And I think
Well,
that if that happened, the world would be a very different place. But like there's a lot
back
that has to
back
happen before that would.
back in the day amongst my peers, that was pretty normal. You turned 18, you were probably doing these things. I don't know. I first tried psychedelics, I was about 15, so I don't know. It's, you know, did they wreck my life or did they make my life great? Well, I'll take option number two there. Thank you. I think they were very good for me.
Yeah, I would say it had a pretty positive effect on you.
Yeah, and just as a technical thing, as an artist, LSD and mushrooms really showed me how to look at stuff, how to see things, you know, how to look through the skin of things and see below the surface, how to analyze colors or analyze the patterns by which clouds form or water trickles downstream or the way plants grow, all those things. You can sort of visualize them when you're influenced properly. And as an artist, they helped me very much in the visual sense to be able to visualize things and to draw and paint them. So as an artistic tool, sometimes people ask me, you know, well, what can I do to be a better artist? I have recommended, well, take a good heavy dose from time to time,
Mm-hmm.
but with intention.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's incredible the amount of visual stimulus and inspiration and information you can receive that can be so inspiring and impactful. And I mean, I've seen people both with as visual artists and musicians be dramatically impacted by the use of psychedelics, and to see a complete transformation of their creativity in a positive way through it. That's something I'd love to see studied more, because, you know, right now there's a lot of emphasis on studying how PTSD can be treated with psychedelics and stuff like that. And that's great. I'm really all for the healing, you know, the psychological healing stuff. But I would love to see art and creativity studied more and how psychedelics
Well,
relate to that.
there have been some studies of people who are artists, how their artwork appears while they're tripping and
Mm.
versus when they're not, which are interesting studies. But for me, it doesn't ever happen when I'm tripping. I make my stuff. I'm not tripping when I make my stuff. When I'm
Right.
tripping, it's more like I'm learning. And then when I learn my lesson, I come back to the studio and work with it. It's
Mm-hmm.
more how it works for me.
Yeah, we have like maybe 5 minutes left. But yeah, I remember seeing some studies back in the 1960s. This guy, Dr. Oscar Janiger, did some studies on LSD and the
Yeah.
creative process. But I don't think, you know, they've repeated a lot of the studies. Like they repeated the Good Friday experiment, but they haven't really repeated these studies about how psychedelics impact art and creativity, as far as I know. And that has to do a lot with the values of the culture. It's like the MAPS organization is treating PTSD because that's a big problem in the military, and that's where a lot of the funding comes from. And you know, so it's like you got to kind of like play by the rules a bit. And the culture at large doesn't value art as highly as these other things. But I would love to see more studies around art and creativity with psychedelics. For me, it's obvious, and you know, for all my friends who are psychedelic artists, it's obvious too to see how much of an impact it can make, you know. But I would just love to see more legitimate scientific research about that.
That would be wonderful. We're going to have to get back past the culture war thing just a little bit, though. Back in the day, Tim Leary and Richard Alpert, you know, who became Ram Dass, were
Mm-hmm.
very much into clinically supervised experiences where the set and setting were very important, and it would be good to have a trained psychologist along, hold your hand and guide you on your journey. And so they had a very slow approach, and out here on the West Coast, LSD got loose amongst a gang of merry pranksters. And they decided they didn't want to wait around for any clinical studies. They were going to turn the monster loose on the population as quick as they could. So they ran around in a bus with garbage cans full of electric Kool-Aid and, went coast to coast, passing it out and getting the youth of America jazzed on all this stuff. And thank God they did, because Leary would probably still be bogged down in clinical experiments 40 years later. Most of us wouldn't have had the experiences. So both are good. Letting the monster go crazy and let him loose in the world is excellent, but also we should do as many scientific studies as we possibly can to find out how it all really works, which is what MAPS does, of course. But yeah, it's true, they had to take the path of where they could find something that the government would agree to, and helping out soldiers with PTSD seemed to be a good path to take, and actually it appears to be a positive path. Seems to work. So that's all. Yeah, that's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we don't have much time left. Thanks so much, Mark. This is such a cool chat. If you have any kind of like closing words to send us off on, and thanks for everybody who's been listening to this conversation as well. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, all I'd like to say is, if you're an artist, be fearless in your creativity. If you're a social activist, get out there and demonstrate. We need to make a lot of changes. Let's all work together. And if you aren't familiar with my work, I have a lot of images on my Instagram, Mark Henson Art, or on my Facebook, or on my regular webpage, which is also markhensonart.com. So if you're not familiar with my work, please go have a look. And if you're really interested, you feel free to message me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And thank you, Jake, for having me on. It's really nice to be there in Bali with you vicariously. So Selamat Jalan to you. And I guess we will see everybody on the next podcast.
Yeah, much love, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me. It's really my pleasure.
Yep. Yeah, this was fun. It's always interesting to try out this new forms of communicating. So it's as you know, a lot of artists have been experimenting with these various hookups, and so we'll all be seeing each other more in the future this way, I think. So
absolutely. Blessings. Thanks, everyone.
Sessions podcast with J. Cole.